We can look at this as an argument and an objection. Right? So Harry Potter is basically making the following argument in the form of a question. There are dangerous things out there that we need to guard against, right? And so we should be learning how to use magic in our own defense. Now, the teacher's response is to say, your argument doesn't work because there's nothing out there that's threatening you that you need to defend yourself against. And of course, Harry Potter then comes up with an objection to her objection, which is, yes, there is. There's an evil wizard out there named Lord Voldemort, right, who's trying to kill people, right, including us, including particularly Harry. Right? So see what you've got here. Harry gives an argument. His teacher, Professor Umbridge, gives an objection to the argument, and then he gives an objection to her objection. Right? So remember, an objection is an argument whose conclusion is that something is wrong with another argument. In a previous presentation, we addressed the structure of arguments. So we talked a little bit about how arguments work. Now this leads us to the question, do objections work differently from other arguments? The basic answer is no. Objections are just a special type of argument that work like any other argument. Right? So an objection will typically involve a conclusion, evidence for the conclusion, that is, reasons to believe the conclusion is true, warrant for the conclusion, reason to believe that the evidence is a reason to believe the conclusion is true, and then evidence for the evidence, and warrant for the evidence, and blah, 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 blah. Right? As you know, it can go on forever. At some point, you have to stop. So basically, objections have the same structure as any other argument. Right? What makes them distinctive is not the structure of the argument, it's the nature of the conclusion. What makes them distinctive is that objections are arguments for the conclusion that something is wrong with another argument. Right? Beyond that, they tend to work like other arguments. Now, there is a kind of a partial exception here. Objections require special attention to how you introduce the argument. Now, as I've said, the only thing that distinguishes an objection from any other argument is its conclusion. And the conclusion of an objection is always one of the following. Something that someone else said is not true, or something that someone else said does not prove what it's supposed to prove. Okay, so let's look back at the Harry Potter example. Right? Harry Potter said we need to learn defensive magic, right, in order to defend ourselves against serious dangers. Now, implied was, and there are serious dangers out there we need to defend ourselves against. The teacher came back by saying, there is nothing out there that you need to defend yourself against. Why? Because no one's going to attack children like you. Right? So she was saying, one of the assumptions in your argument does not work. Right? Your claim that there are dangers out there that you need to be able to defend yourself against does not work. When people present objections, they tend to leave out two very important points. First, they fail to tell the reader exactly what point in their argument they want to criticize. Or more precisely, they fail to tell the reader exactly what point in the original argument they want to criticize. They also fail to explain why their objection creates a problem for the argument that they want to criticize. Okay. Now let's take another look, a brief look at that exchange between Harry Potter and Professor Umbridge, right? Looking particularly at how he comes back with an objection to her objection. Notice in this clip, Harry really only says a few words. I don't know, maybe Lord Voldemort. Now, he's not spelling things out, and he's doing it for a couple reasons. First of all, the people who made the movie assume that everybody who goes to see that movie has seen one of the previous movies or books. So they know who Lord Voldemort is, they know the background, they know what he means by that. And the second is, it's a response to a question she just asked. Right? Now, if someone were to talk about that point in the movie, right, for another person, they couldn't just say, Harry said Lord Voldemort. They'd have to say, okay, Professor Umbridge was claiming that there's nobody out there that wants to harm them. Right? So Harry said that there is someone who wants to harm him, and his evidence for that is Lord Voldemort is out there on the loose trying to kill people. Now, people might say, okay, wait, but what does that have to do with the kids in this school? In which case you'd have to fill in, well, there's one particular kid at the school he targets, he doesn't like the headmaster, you'd go into all kinds of things from the book. Now, if someone has read the books, or particularly if they'd read the books up to this one, that wouldn't have to be explained to them. But if a person was unfamiliar with the Harry Potter series and you were trying to explain Harry's argument, you'd have to fill in those gaps. Right? So, the point is, when you're presenting an objection, particularly in a piece of writing, it's helpful to clarify, first of all, what point in the other person's argument you want to criticize, and second, right, why your objection is relevant, right, to the argument that they were making. To illustrate this point, I want to take a look at some examples. Okay? So I want you to now take the first quiz. Right? And the first quiz is going to illustrate why it's so important to supply context.